My oh my, things are starting to get interesting in the state of Georgia. We'll take a look at the recent voter fraud allegations there. Plus, former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson joins us to discuss the latest lockdown madness. Friends, it's time for Hold the Line.
You know, I called early on for a signature audit. Obviously, the Secretary of State, per the laws and the Constitution, would have to order that. He has not done that. I think it should be done. I think, especially with what we saw today, it raises more questions. There needs to be transparency on that.
Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. That was Georgia Governor Brian Kemp expressing his support for a signature audit of absentee ballots in that state. Governor Kemp's statement comes after a widely circulated video appears to show suspicious activity, you don't say, during the vote counting process in Fulton County. Of course, Fulton County includes a large portion of Atlanta, an area that is controlled by Democrats. Kemp isn't the only politician crying foul. Georgia Congressman Jody Hice tweeted, "This looks like election fraud on a mass scale. Fulton officials throw everyone out of the room and start counting ballots in secret for 2 hours. 3,000 ballots per hour per machine, multiple machines. The margin in Georgia is 12,000. You do the math." Despite the support of Governor Kemp, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who would ultimately have to order a signature audit, he's not willing to do so. No matter what ends up happening in the coming days, the idea that there's no evidence of voter fraud or irregularities, a claim that's been repeated ad nauseum by Democrats in the media, appears to be flat out wrong at this point. There's evidence, friends. The only issue that remains is it proof, and how much of this are we going to see? That's what we need to know. Here's an attorney for President Trump who is listing, Ray Smith, listing some of the irregularities that we've seen with Georgia on our minds.
2,506 felons voted illegally in Georgia. At least 2,423 individuals to vote who were not listed as registered. 1,043 individuals to cast ballots who had illegally registered to vote using a post office box. 10,315 or more individuals to vote who are deceased by the time of the election.
Now, these are all verifiable one way or the other. If we had a real news media, they would be spending their time trying to help the public get the truth here, but we don't. We have a bunch of people dedicated, who call themselves journalists, dedicated to making sure that Joe Biden is president and nothing else matters. They don't care. Always remember this. They don't care what it took to get this done for good old Sleepy Joe. So if you're hoping that they're going to come forward and all of a sudden develop ethics, we're going to be waiting a very, very long time, and Joe Biden will become the president. So we continue to fight. Let's look at what happened in Georgia. We have video of this now. It's not just affidavits, although that also counts as evidence, sworn affidavits. They're used in courts all the time, all across the country. So what really went down here? You see people pulling from under a table what seemed to be suitcases full of ballots. They did this after hours. They did this when Republican poll watchers left. The reason Republican poll watchers are supposed to be able to observe things going on Election Day is so we don't have these concerns. Yet the poll watchers, as we know, were always pushed away, so they couldn't really do their jobs because of COVID. That was the excuse used. And in this case, we have video showing that there were votes being counted after hours with no one able to observe if this was on the up and up. Now, I've seen some of the early excuses about this, that it has to do with being called a cutter, a person who separates the absentee ballots from the envelopes from the ballots themselves. Maybe, but don't we think that we should all get an answer here? Doesn't this look shady? Wouldn't this be considered in a criminal investigation probable cause, and perhaps then you would even have warrants? That's right, bring the force of law into this, because the American people deserve answers. We keep being lectured by the left, by the Democrats, about how we need to show good faith in this transition. Trump needs to concede. How can we have good faith when the other side refuses to allow us the time and the due process to have questions like this answered? This is essential. The trajectory of this country will be different depending on how this fight over the 2020 election turns out. We all understand the stakes here are very high, but they're hoping to shame you into silence. Remember, in the early days, it was a perfect election. That's what they were telling you. Then they said, that there was no fraud. Okay, there were irregularities, but no fraud. Now they're saying, well, maybe there's some fraud, but not enough that it would change the outcome. And soon it'll be, well, it wasn't systemic, it was just a few bad apples. That's my prediction of where this is all going. Rudy Giuliani tweeted this out, as you know, he's leading Trump's legal team for this. The Georgia middle-of-the-night theft of thousands of votes changes everything. Watch it, and Biden does not elect anything. Looks like Biden Democrats doing a bank heist. In 5 states, there are 800 sworn statements of eyewitnesses to Democrat cheating. States changing. This is somebody who was the mayor of New York City, who was a U.S. attorney for years, who was very senior in the Department of Justice, and he is convinced that they are just at the precipice here of finding the smoking guns they need to turn this whole thing around and get justice, because ultimately that's what this is really about. Counting only the votes that should be counted. Illegal votes, for every illegal vote, another vote is nullified, right? An actual legal vote doesn't really count. So this is essential for our respect for our democracy and for our system. We fight until we get the answers we need here. That's our position. They're hoping to shame you into silence. Who are you going to believe? CNN or the video showing stuff that should force you to at least ask questions? I think that much is pretty clear, right? We all know what the answer to that question is. Well, CNN probably doesn't. There's something else. I understand that there is a critical Senate, 2 Senate seats up, a Senate runoff happening on January 5th. And right now there's a sense among some conservatives, some on the right, some Trump supporters, that the system is so corrupt that it's not even worth showing up. Let me tell you something, friends. The response to cheating is not to throw in the towel and let the other side have their way. The response is to dig in. It's to fight back with everything you've got. We can still play by the rules and fight. And if we want to be able to do that going forward, we better darn sure try everything we can do to make sure we win those 2 Senate seats in Georgia. We can do these things at the same time. We can get answers for Trump, and we can make sure that Republicans turn out in Georgia to the best of their ability. And we need a maximum turnout there, because if Democrats have control of government with the House, the Senate, and the presidency, then we really have concerns about the future. You think we're going to be able to fight then? They'll take away all the tools that we have to try to slow down the left-wing madness. That's right. We need to hold the line, you could say, against this insanity. And we will. So that's, I think, what's essential for everyone to keep in mind here. Don't forget it. They're going to try to get you to just move past all of this. Don't allow it. All right, small businesses continue to suffer under crushing lockdowns. After the break, we'll talk to the lawyer for one bar who is fighting back. Stay with us. Economic uncertainty has left us all wondering about the future. Stock market seems to blow back and forth like the winds of political change. So what do we do to protect ourselves and our income for the future? For over a decade now, simple and conservative real estate investing has been the retirement answer for thousands of done-for-you real estate clients. It's now part of my answer to retirement. I'm not just a believer in what done-for-you real estate does, I'm also a client. I recently closed on my first ever investment property, all through my friends at Done-For-You Real Estate. Their system flat out works. Done-For-You Real Estate found me an amazing property, got me the financing, got it all fixed up, and are now renting it out and managing it for me. They're an award-winning, groundbreaking company with 13 years of experience that allows everyday, hardworking Americans to finally own investment real estate without all the risk and difficulty of doing it on your own. Visit doneforyoubuck.com to learn more and find out if you qualify to take advantage of what may be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to finally own your own investment real estate.
We've had a tough time just like everybody else. With the shutdown, we will continue to open. We will do everything in a safe manner, but we have no confidence in the leadership of the city and state, and we will continue to open if there is another shutdown.
That was Denny Presti, co-owner of the bar Max Public House in Staten Island. Danny was arrested Tuesday night for declaring his bar an autonomous zone and defying Governor Cuomo's strict coronavirus lockdowns for some zones of the city, not for others. But this New Yorker isn't the only one fighting for his freedom. After being hauled off in handcuffs, hundreds of patriots gathered outside Danny's bar in protest of the radical government restrictions. Danny has since been released with a series of tickets and violations. His attorney, Louis Gerolmino, joins us now with an update on what happens next. Lou, thanks so much.
Hey, Buck. Thanks for having us.
So just
Appreciate
for everyone watching, in case they don't know what initially happened here, we have a bar and restaurant, Max Public House on Staten Island. What happened with your clients? How did this whole circumstance come to be?
So what happened was the governor, in all his wisdom, decided to cut Staten Island in half and declare an orange zone on the south shore of Staten Island and a yellow zone on the north shore of Staten Island, where an orange zone restriction does not allow indoor dining, and gym and going to the gym, nor getting haircuts. Basically, he shut down the small businesses on the south shore of Staten Island while leaving the other half of Staten Island open.
Now, what did your client do in response to this, and what happened with the arrival of law enforcement?
Well, after complying with all the government restrictions to reopen his business by spending money to socially distance his bar, put a new filter in, open outside dining, separate the tables, after spending all that money and finally reopening after being shut down for 6 months and then being re-shut down because of this orange zone restriction. And my client just had enough, and he is fighting back and remaining open no matter what happens.
How many sheriffs from New York went in for the initial, what we call it, a raid, a citation incident, whatever they want to say? How many were there?
I happened to be driving by the place on my way to my son's basketball workout, and I walked in just to speak to Danny and Keith, the two owners. And I was there for literally 30 seconds when 20 sheriff's deputies, not NYPD Buck, sheriff's deputies, barged in the place, threw the 4 patrons out, and locked the door and kept the employees, Danny Presti, who was one of the general manager and a part owner, and myself locked in the place for an hour and 15 minutes. And at the end of it, they took Danny in handcuffs and they issued me, as his attorney, 4 criminal court summonses, 4 criminal court charges that I now have to answer to for doing absolutely nothing. When they barged in, I turned to Danny, I turned to the sheriffs, and I said, we're going to be nothing but cooperative and polite. Do what you have to do. And we were the whole entire time. Danny got arrested for obstructing government administration, and he did nothing but act in a polite, respectful manner to those officers, even though 2 or 3 of them were very, very rude and aggressive.
Now, this is not something that has gone unnoticed. I know that it's been on national news. People have been talking about this all week, and there was a rally earlier in the week in Staten Island with hundreds of patriots. We have some video of it. Let's play it, and then I'll have you react.
This is a battle, people. I've been warning you, and finally you're out here. You business owners, I see your faces. How f***ing fed up you are. Yeah! You can go to Home Goods and buy a porcelain bunny for your f***ing mantle, but these guys can't sell a hamburger and a beer.
Is there a legal case that either you or some of these other business owners and individuals may try to bring against New York State for exactly the capricious and arbitrary nature of some of these regulations that separate out a business that can operate in one area but not in another, even if they're only blocks, even yards apart?
Absolutely ridiculous, Buck. We've already brought the lawsuits. My partners and I, Mark Fonte and James Mamingus, we were at the forefront of this for the last 9 months. We're representing all the restaurant owners, all the business owners on Staten Island pro bono. We haven't charged them a dime. We brought 4 lawsuits already. We will bring another lawsuit next week. And I just want to say, Buck, there were over 2,000 people there on that rally. 2,000 Staten Islanders. I've been living in Staten Island my whole life. I've never been more proud to call myself a Staten Islander. My friends and neighbors and small business owners were out there rallying in a peaceful, respectful manner. There might have been some curse words said, but nothing violent. We did not riot. We did not loot our neighbor's property. We protested in a peaceful manner. And I have to say, people actually stayed and cleaned up after the protest. This is how you're supposed to protest in America, Buck, and I was proud to be a part of it.
Lou, before we let you get back to what you're doing here representing everybody, I just want to ask you what redress you want, both for your client and also for these lawsuits. What would you like to see if the courts rule in your favor? What would that mean for Staten Island, and I assume then for New York City?
You know, sadly, I don't think the courts in New York State are going to rule against Mayor de Blasio or Governor Cuomo. I'm glad you asked that question. I would just, Buck, to be a leader, you have to care about your people, right? That's the first rule of leadership. Whether you're in the Army, whether you're in a sports team, whether you're a corporation, the person leading has to care about his people. We urge Governor Cuomo, these are your constituents. These are the people you were elected to lead. You have to care about them. We understand he has a very difficult job to do. We understand that the COVID virus is here and it's affecting people. But we just urge him to consider another way. Consider what these business owners are going through. Stop being sarcastic and rude and just pandering to the people that are rioting and looting. Show true leadership, and true leadership is showing that you care about your people.
Lou, good luck to you and to your clients. Please give them my best, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for your support, Buck. We really appreciate it.
Joe Biden revealing his big idea to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus is masks. Wow, how innovative. Up next, we'll talk to former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson about the latest COVID-19 lockdown madness. These days, being prepared for the unknown is more important than ever. I'm sure you've noticed the world we live in is anything but predictable. We could all benefit from something reliable right about now. What could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about real gold and silver you can actually hold right in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group now. Learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home, or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k. Just call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD and ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now, 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. Call them right now at 833-600-GOLD. Don't wait for inflation to kick in. Don't wait to see what the economy does and what happens to the dollars in your bank account. You think the national debt's going to go away? No, it's only going to get bigger. There's going to be a lot of pressure on the Fed. Go take action today. Diversify, protect yourself with gold. 833-600-GOLD.
I don't want to scare anybody here, but understand the facts. We're likely to lose another 250,000 people dead between now and January. You hear me? Because people aren't paying attention.
We got Sleepy Joe Biden echoing warnings from public health experts about the U.S. coronavirus death toll, driving more fear and anxiety among Americans. This after the so-called president-elect announced some of the first mandates he'll demand we follow. Watch.
On the first day I'm inaugurated to say I'm going to ask the public for 100 days to mask. Just 100 days to mask. Not forever, 100 days. And I think we'll see a significant reduction if we occur that, if that occurs with vaccinations and masking to drive down the numbers considerably.
Because we haven't been masking already? Is that really the plan, Mr. Biden? Wear a mask, close your business, cancel everything, stay home. We've turned the corner, my friends. If we don't stand up to this government overreach now, we're not going to get the chance to do so again until the damage is fully done. Joining me now is someone who's been very outspoken on this over the past few months, Alex Berenson, former New York Times reporter and author of the hit online, Unreported Truths about COVID-19 and lockdowns. All right, Alex, let's just jump into this because I'm not a doctor, don't play one on TV. But I do know that I live in New York City and we've been masking and had all these rules and regulations in place for months. And now they're telling us we need to do more of that while the cases are surging in major urban areas across the country. If this stuff works, why isn't it working?
Well, I think that's a great question. The answer is that it doesn't really work. Nothing really works very well except being the right time of year, and sort of being outside and not being forced to be inside a lot. There's considerable evidence that masks really don't protect the wearer at all, and now we have a new big study out of Denmark that was very well designed and done that essentially proved that beyond any doubt. Masks do not protect the wearer from coronavirus. I'm not talking about N95 respirators when they're properly worn. I'm talking about the masks that most people wear every day and that are sort of realistic to expect people to wear. And then this question of source control, whether or not my mask protects you, as you've heard, that turns out to be probably nonsense too. The reasons are sort of technical, and I go into them in the booklet. But the fact is that the masks are they're just not essentially, they're not able to filter out particles that are small enough to make much of a difference. The viral particle itself is too small, and what are called aerosol particles, which contain a lot of the virus that does transmit the COVID, are also too small for most masks to filter out. So those don't work. Lockdowns, maybe they work temporarily. It's not really clear, but it is also, what is very clear is that if you lock down hard and then you eventually you have to have society back, you have to let up on the lockdown, eventually the virus comes back. Europe saw that very, very clearly this fall. All these people who are telling us all these important things we need to do, back in July and August, they were telling us what a great job Europe had done. Europe had suppressed this virus and we hadn't. France, Italy, they'd done the right things. They'd contact trace, they'd locked down for months. Finally, they'd begun to let up. Well, guess what? France, Italy, Spain, the UK, and really all of Europe have had terrible outbreaks, or, very large outbreaks this fall. And, because when you lock down, you just delay the virus from spreading, widely enough that we get to herd immunity or something close to it. Now, here's one thing that might actually work, okay? I follow the science. I do my best to follow the science. The early vaccine data looks very promising. And that's a good thing. We should be happy about that. I'm not saying we should all run out to take this vaccine right now. I think we need to see safety data. And I think for people who are in low risk categories, there's no real urgency to do this. But when we're talking about people who are at, really high risk, really elderly people with severe comorbidities, this vaccine, these vaccines, they might do some good. But the fact is, whatever we do or don't do, and let's hope vaccines can sort of take get us to a better place, in the relatively near future. This vaccine, so many people in the United States have now gotten COVID or gotten SARS-CoV-2 and recovered from it, that it looks like I think we are closer to the end of this than the beginning, no matter what we do. There's a plausible case to be made that more than 100 million Americans, almost a third of the country, have already gotten this. So Alex, this idea that, sorry.
That's okay. No, go ahead. Finish your point. The idea that.
So this idea that, there's just terrible, terrible days ahead. If a third of the country's already been past this, then we're closer to the end of this than the beginning, with or without a vaccine.
Now, the CDC director, masks is something that's near and dear to my heart because I have to wear them on the treadmill. I have to wear them when I walk through my lobby in New York. I hate this. I think this is absurd. I see people when I get into taxis pull their mask up after it's been down for, the last 2 hours or the last 30 minutes or whatever it is when they're starting their shift. So we can all see that this is an imperfect science at best. When the CDC director says that the science is settled on this, and I'm asking you this honestly, what is he talking about? Where is the science that settles that this, because anyone just observing, not even pretending to be a scientist, looking around would say that these policies of social distancing and masking have not in any way been worth the cost and the irritation. So is there science? Is there data that we can all read and look at to least see what the CDC director is talking about?
Yeah, you can look at what they're talking about that supports their case. It's very weak, okay? And to get into why, let me give you an example that I use in the booklet, okay? What you want are what are called randomized controlled trials. That's where you take a large group of people, you split them into, usually two categories. You give one category a drug and you give the other category a placebo. And then at the end, whether it's a month or 6 months or a year, however long, you see if something's changed. So that's why if you go to the doctor and you have high cholesterol, that doctor is going to say, hey, you should take a statin, because there's really good evidence that statins will lower your cholesterol and probably reduce the risk of your heart attack, you having a heart attack or a stroke. Okay, they've done this work, so they know. There is nothing like that showing that masks do any good, essentially. And in fact, again, when you go back to this Danish trial, it shows the opposite. It shows that masks don't really work. So what do they have? What do these people who say masks work have? They have a bunch of stuff from laboratories showing that masks, when they're properly fitted, seem to slow the spread of somewhat large particles in human breath. And they have what are called observational studies. And one they always come back to is, well, there were these two hairdressers in Missouri who had COVID, and they had 139 patients, and they wore masks, and 139 clients, and all those clients wore masks, and nobody got COVID. Okay, that sounds good. Here's the problem. We don't know whether maybe that hair salon had really good ventilation. We don't know whether those two hairdressers just happened to be careful, whether they happened not to be very infectious for some reason. We don't know. That's why we have to do really good clinical trials. You know, in medicine, the ultimate line is first, do no harm. And medicine learned this the hard way for about a millennia, when they bloodlet and they used leeches and they put holes in people's heads, and terrible, ideas were tried, and they were never really tested in a thorough way, and they became part of the culture of medicine. And in the last 150 years, medicine has gone away from that, and they've gone to this idea of, we need clinical trials. We need really to test things. And suddenly with COVID, that's out the window. And that's why, look, I'm not a scientist, although I covered the drug industry for the New York Times for a long time, and I've written a lot about science and medicine over the last 20 years. But there are very good scientists out there who just think what we're doing right now is a huge mistake and is going to have long-term impacts on science, because we're going back to this idea of, oh, it sounds good, and here's 3 people out there who would seem to work for, so everybody's got to do it now. That's
Before
a
we let
mistake.
you go, Alex, I've got to ask you, the Great Barrington Declaration, I mean, I signed it, so my name is there online. I'm sure you signed it too. Aren't those scientists? Why do we always hear, listen to the scientists, and then there are these scientists, you're bringing up some of them now, who don't agree with lockdowns as a policy because of all the things we know about keeping children out of school, drug abuse, suicide, addiction, obesity, all these things that it worsens. Do they not count as scientists? I don't understand.
Well, I mean, they're actually very, very good scientists, and in many cases, they're not conservative. You know, they're a lot of these people are quite progressive and are just worried about the societal effect of lockdowns, and how poor people are getting hit harder. That's a media problem. Okay, that's a problem of, we're not going to explain to you that there's real dissension in the scientific community about this. We're just going to tell you what Tony Fauci says, and the fact that these people from Harvard and Oxford and Stanford and lots of other places disagree. We don't care. It doesn't count.
Got to ask you this. Got to ask you this before we let you go, Alex. Would you, if you were advising an incoming administration, would you tell them to fire Dr. Fauci at this point?
I would, but he didn't just not get fired. He's getting promoted. He's going to run the whole show.
A classic bureaucrat, but you would fire him, so would I. Alex, good luck on the book. Thanks so much for all your work on this, and we'll be out there in the battles. I'll see you.
Thanks, Buck.
The left had a lot to say about foreign election interference of the past few years when it had to do with Trump and Russia, but they've gone silent on that issue recently, which is interesting. Could it be because the Chinese Communist Party helped Joe Biden this time around? We're going to talk to Gordon Chang about China's possible role in the 2020 election when we come back. Communist China continues its campaign of aggression in its quest to unseat the U.S. as the world's sole superpower. Whether it's TikTok stealing Americans' data or their manipulation of currency, unfair trade practices, and even encouraging domestic unrest, there's no low that Beijing doesn't seem like it's willing to stoop to in order to undermine our nation's future. To discuss all this and more, I'm joined by the author of The Coming Collapse of China, Gordon Chang, also author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Gordon, so good to see you.
Thank you so much, Buck.
So there's a lot here, Gordon, but let's start with election interference, because we heard so much about that with regard to Russia starting in 2016. Really, after Hillary lost the 2016 election is when we started hearing a lot about it. But you've been raising alarms about how China was trying to influence this most recent election. Please tell us what you've got.
Well, first of all, the Chinese Foreign Ministry and the Communist Party's Global Times engaged in malicious disinformation campaigns all through this year. And they were directed to unseating President Trump. But there were also the underground troll farms, the bots, and they were working against the president as well. So, for instance, Spamouflage Dragon, which is a large network that was active on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, was going after the president. We know that China's operations were large. Twitter, for instance, took down 174,000 fake Chinese accounts in 1 month. The New York Times reported about text messages and social media feeds spreading rumors that China knew was false about coronavirus. Didn't put the president in a good light. So there is a lot that Beijing did this year to make sure that the president did not get reelected.
Now, Gordon, people are also looking at the timeline. You mentioned COVID and what China knew and what it was telling the rest of the world. Can you just tell everyone watching this right now, what were some of the steps that they took that showed a disregard for the rest of the world's safety in the early days of the pandemic? And then I want to ask you about how China's doing with it now. But first, let's go back to the beginning.
Well, there were three things. First of all, China lied about the contagiousness of the disease. China pressured countries to accept arrivals from China. And then China downplayed the severity of the disease. Beijing admitted for the first time that the coronavirus was contagious on January 20. But doctors in Wuhan, the epicenter, knew no later than the second week of December, and they may have even known in August, as a Harvard Medical School study suggests. Now, if China had said nothing during this time, that would have been grossly irresponsible. But the Chinese tried to convince the world that it was not readily transmissible from one human to the next. So this was active deception. And at the same time, Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, pressured countries to not impose travel restrictions and quarantines on arrivals from China when he was imposing these same measures internally. So he knew these measures were effective, and yet he was forcing them to accept passengers from China who spread the disease. So, Buck, this was an intentional spreading of the coronavirus beyond China's borders. That meant China wanted people to be infected and to die, and that is murderous.
Now, Gordon, you've said before that China's acts here were obviously beyond the pale, and also when you add this to what they've done here, what you've laid out in terms of election interference, do you view these as what could be considered acts of war?
Killing 278,000 Americans as of today strikes me as an act of war. But there were other ones as well. So, for instance, Radio Free Asia is reporting that an intelligence unit of the People's Liberation Army based themselves in the now closed Houston consulate. And from there, they used big data and artificial intelligence to identify Americans likely to participate in riots, specifically what we saw this spring. And then the Chinese military sent out through TikTok videos on how to riot. So this was more than just subversion, Buck. This was an act of war.
And Gordon, you mentioned TikTok. We had heard from the president that there was going to be some kind of a forced sale. I mean, back in July, CNN, TikTok is a national security threat, U.S. politicians say. CNN had this piece. And we were told that there was going to be a sale to an American company. Where does that stand? This kind of fell off the headlines.
Well, on December 14th, there's a hearing in federal court about President Trump's forced divestiture of TikTok. But federal district judges have stayed his order. He's trying to arrange a sale, perhaps to Oracle, maybe to Walmart, some sort of combination of that. But China has acted to block that by new regulations on the export of technology. And TikTok has a lot of technology covered by those new rules. So this is one area where the president's efforts have been failing. What the president should have done early on is, instead of trying to arrange a sale, he just should have banned it. And that would have been much cleaner, and he would have had stronger legal arguments. Now, this drama is not over, but the president does not seem to be winning this one.
Gordon, the president's got his plate full these days with a lot of things. Tell me this, how is China doing right now with COVID-19? Because we see U.S. cases all-time high for deaths. Europe is having the same problems we are, so it's clearly not just an America thing. This has hit the Western world very hard. China, it seems like they're going back to normal more than we are, or is that just propaganda? What's happening?
Well, I think that they're more back to normal than we are, but probably they are hiding cases, and a substantial number of them. In January 26th, the Communist Party appointed its task force on the coronavirus, and the 9-person roster had only one public health official. The rest of them were propaganda workers, as China calls them, or party hacks, which shows you the priorities of the Communist Party on this. That was to control the narrative. So I think that we are seeing outbreaks of cases in China. They're probably more severe, much more severe than Beijing is talking about. But yeah, I mean, they don't have as bad a time of it now as we do.
And what are your thoughts about the possibility of a Biden administration here and its shift, its pivot on China? What do you think that will mean? How do you think the Chinese Communist Party will view that?
Well, I think that they're happy that the outcome of November 3, or at least the apparent outcome. One thing we know, regardless of what Joe Biden himself thinks about China, every new occupant of the White House gives China a grace period. Every administration thinks that it can do better than the predecessor. Now, that Trump gave them about a 14-month grace period. The difference between 2017 and 2021, however, is that now we don't have a moment to lose because China's attacks have become more malicious, certainly unrelenting. And so right now we're at great peril because although Americans don't realize this, our republic is at risk. And we're in an existential conflict with China where there's only going to be one survivor. It's either going to be the People's Republic of China or the United States of America, not both. China last year declared a quote unquote people's war on us. They consider us an enemy and they are willing to kill us. So this is important for us to understand the fundamental nature of this challenge.
To follow more of Gordon's analysis, you can see him on Twitter, Gordon G. Chang. Also pick up his latest booklet, The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Gordon, always good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Buck.
All right, the most interesting, funniest, outrageous, liberal lunacy from all over the internet. That's right, your favorite. The Friday edition of The Buckshot comes up now. Fellow patriots, MAGA CBD is a revolutionary American-made product that is safe for work, THC-free, and features patented NASA technology. So it's the highest quality CBD oil you can get on the market. They're dedicated to providing the purest, most effective products anywhere. MAGA CBD provides third-party testing results from industry-leading experts. They prove what they're saying. MAGA CBD is 100% committed to customer satisfaction and product quality. Best of all, 10% of proceeds benefit veterans and first responders. Look, MAGA CBD has helped me sleep through the night, something that I've struggled with a lot in the past. And when you taste the difference with their apple pie flavored oil, you'll realize this is the best CBD you're going to get anywhere. Plus, what CBD product in the market could be more American? MAGA, NASA, apple pie. It's America at its finest. For your CBD needs, look no further than MAGA CBD. Learn more and order today at magacbd.org and save 10% with promo code BUCK. That's magacbd, Charlie Bravo Delta.org, promo code BUCK. Joe Biden accidentally says the quiet part out loud. Tempers flare over at CNBC over COVID lockdowns. And New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy has some words for Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. Settle up, friends. Time for the Buckshot. Now, there are people like me who have been saying for many months now, it seems likely, seems probable. Now, this is a prediction, so who knows, but it seems very, very plausible, very possible that you might have Joe Biden decide, just because in the middle of a presidency, if he becomes president, I know, but if that were to happen, that he would step down. Why finish it out? His age is up there, and he could very easily pass the torch to Kamala Harris and be a Democrat hero for all ages, right? They would love him on the left. And then he said this, which is interesting. Play it.
When we disagree, it'll be just like, so far, it's been just like when Barack and I did. It's in private. She'll say, I think we should do A, B, C, or D. And I'll say, I like A, don't like B and C. And it's go, okay. And like I told Barack, if I reach something where there's a fundamental disagreement we have based on a moral principle, I'll develop some disease and say I have to resign.
I'll develop some disease and say I have to resign. Why does his mind go there when he's talking about a disagreement with a vice president? Anybody want to come up with a plausible explanation for that one? How many of you have thought, yeah, if I have a disagreement in the workplace, I'm just going to develop a disease and resign? He said it. I'm just repeating it. Seems interesting. Remember Santelli? Back in the day, this guy got the whole Tea Party thing started. A lot of people don't know that. He called for a Tea Party on the floor of I believe it was the Chicago, either Mercantile or Mercantile Exchange, I think. But he called for it on CNBC, a Tea Party. It actually happened, big political movement. Anyway, some interesting recent history for you. I agree with him. That's not going to surprise you. He got into a little bit of a spat with the darling of the liberals. They love this guy, Andrew Ross Sorkin over there. Play this.
Restaurant, or frankly, even a church, are so different, it's unbelievable. Going into a big box retailer,
I disagree.
You're wearing
You can
a mask.
have your thoughts and I
You're
can have mine.
required to wear a mask.
I disagree.
It's science. I'm sorry. It's science. If you're
It's
wearing a
not
mask,
science.
it's a different story.
500 people at a Lowe's aren't any safer than 150 people in a restaurant that holds 600. I don't believe it. Sorry. Don't believe
Okay.
it. And I
You-
live in an
you
area
don't-
where there's a lot of restaurants that have fought back and they don't have any problems. And they're open.
Okay. You don't have to believe it, but let me just say this. You're doing a
I don't,
disservice
and I
to the
won't.
viewer because the viewers need to understand
You are doing a disservice to the viewer. You are. You are.
He is. I agree with Santelli here. Notice how the liberal move is saying, it's the science. It's the science. These are people who not only don't know anything about science, you sit around and wonder, what do they know about exactly? Are these intellectually curious people that apply rigorous thought and independent approaches to problems like this? No, they do not. But that had to do with whether or not you should have big stores open but not churches. Why? Oh, because of masks, right? The masks have become this carve-out. As you know, I have my problems with all this, big problems. So the New York Young Republicans Club, a great group based here in New York City. They had a gala, but the gala wasn't in fact in New York City. It was just across the river in New Jersey because they got to obey the rules. So they obeyed Jersey rules. The governor of New Jersey, Murphy, he had this to say about Congressman Matt Gaetz, who was the keynote speaker at the New York Young Republicans Club event. Play it.
It is beyond the pale that anyone would willingly endanger people in another state, never mind their own. It is also beyond the pale that a member of Congress, actually go back if you could, would participate in this. And that is, no, I want you to go back to the group if you could, Mahan. That guy in the middle, the tall, handsome fellow in the gray suit, that is Representative Matt Gaetz. And based on his past performances, it is obvious being a knucklehead is not beyond the pale for him. He was actually Sarah Palin's backup act for this event. Now, if you go to the next kind of a scene.
I guess I wish I had gone to this because then maybe they would have called me a tall, handsome man, the governor of New Jersey. That would have been kind of fun. But yeah, turns out that people obey the rules as the rules are laid out. And if you don't like those rules, then maybe you shouldn't have such arbitrary and stupid rules, Governor Murphy. And then Pelosi. You know, there's all this back and forth over COVID relief funds. Who's really to blame for millions and millions of Americans not actually getting those COVID relief funds? Pelosi let it slip today that, oh yeah, she's to blame. Play it.
Not to accept half of a loaf months ago when you said, I'm not going to accept half a loaf.
Look, I'm going to tell you something.
Now,
Don't characterize what we did before as a mistake, as a preface to your question, if you want an answer. That was not a mistake. It was a decision, and it has taken us to a place where we can do the right thing without other, shall we say, considerations in the legislation that we don't want. Now, that is it.
Yes, Nancy has been blocking it, and maybe now she'll stop because when the peasants get restless enough, she doesn't want them going for the pitchforks and the torches, she'll throw them some crumbs while she eats cake. That's Nancy for you. That's it for Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is up next. Have a great weekend, everybody. Shields high.